In statistics, we're confronted with lots of data, and we need to try to make sense of it all. For example, here is a list of the life expectancy, the number of years that people live on average, for 197 different countries and territories around the world. Look at all these numbers. How are we going to make sense out of all this? One way is to try to summarize it, try to come up with a few numbers which give us a sense of what the data are all about. As a first step, we can try representing all of these life expectancy values as points on a graph. Well, it still looks kind of like one big jumble of numbers, giving all the life expectancies from Afghanistan all the way to Zimbabwe. Is there any way that we can make better sense of this? Well, for starters, we can rearrange them so that they're in increasing order from the smallest life expectancy up to the biggest life expectancy. That looks a little better. Now we can start to see a few things. For example, we can see that the country Sierra Leone has the smallest life expectancy of just 47.8 years. Meanwhile, the country Japan has the largest life expectancy at 83.4 years. All of the other countries have life expectancies which are somewhere in between. We can also learn a little more. For example, we can look for the country which is halfway along, halfway between the first country and the 197th country. That's the 99th country, which in this case is the country Egypt. And Egypt has a life expectancy of 73.2 years. So we say that the median life expectancy is equal to 73.2 years. It means that half the countries have a life expectancy which is smaller, and half the countries have a life expectancy which is larger. So now we know about the minimum and the maximum and the median. But there's more that we can say too. For example, if we look at the country which is 1/4 of the way along in the graph, then that turns out to be the small island nation of Sao Tome and Principe. And it has an average life expectancy of about 64.7 years. This is called the first quartile, and we can say that 1/4 of the countries have a life expectancy which is less than 64.7, and the other 3/4 have a life expectancy which is more. We can also go 3/4 of the way along the graph. This brings us to the Netherlands Antilles Island Collection, which has an average life expectancy of about 76.7 years. This is called the third quartile, and it tells us that about 3/4 of the countries have an average life expectancy which is less than 76.7 years, and 1/4 of them have a life expectancy which is more. So now we know the minimum, and the first quartile, and the median, and the third quartile, and the maximum. This is a lot of information, but it's also a lot to keep track of. If we want, we can combine all of these numbers together into a single display which is called a box plot. The box plot is illustrated here. We can see that it has a big box between the first quartile and the third quartile with a line which indicates the median. It also has extensions on the bottom and the top which represent the minimum and the maximum values. So we can see by looking at this box plot what is the minimum value, the first quartile, the median, the third quartile, and the maximum value. In this way, we can summarize a lot of information about these life expectancies using just 5 numbers. So now let's try working out an example together. Suppose here are the grades from my seminar class last semester. There were 9 students, and these are the grades that they received. How can we figure out the quartiles and median and so on for these grades? Well, for starters, let's rearrange them into increasing order. First we'll find the smallest number, then the second smallest number, and the third smallest, and so on. That way we get 9 numbers in order. Now we can see right away that the minimum grade was 68, and the maximum grade was 93. What about the median? Well, there's 9 grades, so we want the one which is halfway between the first one and the 9th one, and that's the 5th one. So the median grade is the 5th one, which is equal to 79. What about the first quartile? Well, for that, we want the grade which is 1/4 of the way from the 1st grade up to the 9th grade, which in this case would be the 3rd grade, which is equal to 74. For the 3rd quartile, we want to go 3/4 of the way along from the 1st grade to the 9th grade, and that's the 7th grade, which is 88. In that way, we found the minimum, the 1st quartile, the median, the 3rd quartile, and the maximum value. If we want, we can also make this into a box plot. Again, to draw a box plot, first you draw a big box which goes from the 1st quartile up to the 3rd one. You put a line in where the median is, and then you put extensions to show the minimum value and the maximum value. In that way, we've made our own box plot. Now, let's try one more example of computing the 5-number summary. This one will be a little different for a reason that we'll see. Suppose that there are just 6 students' grades, which are the numbers indicated here. In this case, we can still start by arranging them from the smallest up to the largest. So we can still easily see that the minimum value in this case is 68, and the maximum value in this case is 93. But now what about the median? Well, that should be the number which is halfway from the 1st number up to the 6th number. In this case, that's the 3.5 number. Well, there is no 3.5 number. But no problem. We can just take the number which is halfway between the 3rd number and the 4th number, and that gives us a median which is equal to 81. Now what about the quartiles? Well, the 1st quartile should be the number which is 1/4 of the way along from the 1st number up to the 6th number. In this case, that's the 2.25 number. Well, there's no such number, but we can take the number which is 1/4 of the way from the 2nd number up to the 3rd number, which in this case is equal to 75. So we say the 1st quartile is 75. Similarly, for the 3rd quartile, we need the number which is 3/4 of the way from the 1st number to the 6th number, which in this case is the 4.75 number. Well, there isn't one, but we can take the number which is 3/4 of the way from the 4th number to the 5th number, and that equals 88.5. So now we've been able to compute all the numbers, just being a little more careful. Another way to see this is to draw a graph. If we graph all the numbers from smallest to largest and put a straight line in between them, then we can say right away that the median is the number which is halfway along the graph. The 1st quartile is the number which is 1/4 of the way along the graph, and the 3rd quartile is the number which is 3/4 of the way along the graph. So, in this way, we see that no matter how many numbers we have, we can still compute their minimum and their 1st quartile and their median and their 3rd quartile and their maximum.